Welcome to the workshop. I'm Andrew and this is Watch the West. Today is the debut review of this Pierre Paulin sector dial dress/doctor's watch. Oddly enough, I'm the only order or review on AliExpress thus far for this, so if you've been waiting to see it in the metal, here's your chance. It's not perfect, but it is pretty damn close. On sale, this goes for about 135 US dollars, and typically it lists throughout the year at 165 US dollars. I'm going to compare this to a classic of the AliExpress dress watch scene, the Escapement Time Quartz over here, and you can see how it compares in this very similar space. People often use the passive voice. They say this watch was dropped. Well, I dropped this watch right when I was cleaning it up for the review. And watches are a bit like babies. You really do not want to drop them, especially face first onto ceramic tile. And we sustained a good bit of damage. You can see it hit down here on the bezel and skidded across the crystal here and got some pretty serious scratches. And that is honestly my fault. But it gives us a good chance to look a little more deeply into this. So we'll try the diamond tester. And just to point out, this just tests if they are equivalent hardness. So it's not really going to tell you what like the Mohs scale is, but it's using space magic to test the thermal properties of the crystal. So we know the escapement time is sapphire. So that's our base. So we know it is sapphire. It is an equivalent hardness. And I don't think that there's any kind of coating on this. And really what I suspect is because this is a slightly domed, and I'm so sad to say, a beautiful crystal, I think that just the armor-piercing qualities of your standard issue ceramic tile, just the way that it skidded across that and the pressure is what damaged it. So, if you were to drop the escapement time, you might have similar kind of damage on the bezel or even cracking on the side of the crystal here, but I don't think you'd have the same kind of scratches in the middle. So, good note. The other damage that we did have is on the dial here. Try and get in focus. You can see we actually lost some paint from this interior circle here. And that's a good segue to what is a sector dial watch. By sector dial, we're referring to these concentric circles that subdivide the different timekeeping elements of the minutes, the seconds, and the hours. For that reason, these watches usually don't have a date window, and it's nice that this uses Seiko's NH38, so there's no phantom date position. A lot of companies have made these kinds of watches. It's a bit like concentric circles. You have real quick Patek Philippe, JLC, every tier of the swatch group, so Omega, Longines, Hamilton, and then the micros like Baltic and Dan Henry. What these all share is a sense of mid-century scientific discovery. And shout out to Time and Tide watches here on this one, but really where you're getting that from is the mix of Art Deco formalist elements like the stylized numerals, the blued seconds hand, the railroad track seconds, and at the same time the minimalism of the Bauhaus movement. Speaking of which, because I had to look this up, Pierre Paulin was a celebrated French furniture designer from the mid-century, and his uncle was actually a dissident and inventor that was executed by the Gestapo. Now, this seems to be Mercure's sort of Western vintage-inspired brand, and it is signed Mercure on the buckle here. Now, in a world of fairly questionable, especially legally, names of Chinese watches, I think this one is a bit more creative and sort of calls to mind that European connection. It is a bit of, robbing Peter to pay Paul, but at least I learned something. And, I think it shows a little bit more savoir-faire, or just knowing what to do in terms of naming watches. The diameter is 38.5 millimeters, so slightly larger than the 38 millimeters listed. The lug to lug is about 46 millimeters, and the thickness, including that domed sapphire crystal, is about 12 millimeters. Before I forget, the lug width is 20 millimeters, and that tapers down on this particular strap to 16 millimeters at the buckle. I have to say, I am extremely impressed by the case finishing on this. Granted, we did find out the polished bezel is a bit of a scratch magnet, but that transitions down to straight brushing on the top of the lugs, and that is continued across the case sides and the sides of the lugs. And damn, I must say, those are very sexy lugs. I just really like the sort of architectural curve of them coming down. A nice feature is also this polished chamfer on the top and bottom of the lugs that matches the bezel. The back is, there's nothing on the back, and honestly this would be a good spot for maybe a personal engraving. It would make a good gift. And do be aware that it uses this slightly unusual system for opening the case back, so be careful with this one. The crown is signed with Mercure's logo, and I don't really know how I feel with that, but I don't think it clashes with the aesthetic of the watch. Figured I'd show you the movement here. Now you can tell from the layout of the barrel and the shape of the rotor that this is from the same family of movements. Specifically, this is the 4R series from Seiko. Now if I flip it over, on the left you can see this is the 4R36 date version, and on the right we have the 4R38 no date version. Now if you were to take a no date dial and put it on a date movement, you would still have the mechanism clicking along once a day, and you will also have what's called a ghost position of the crown, which means that you will still have this position used to switch the day. Now if you were to go over to the 4R38, you only have two positions. You have winding and time setting. So on a time-only watch, that can be a lot more satisfying. Another note, which is a complete tangent here, but if someone ever asks you what makes a really expensive watch expensive, and you say movement finishing, and then they just kind of look at you like you had a stroke and start slowly backing away, this is a good example of it, because you can see this was designed with open heart dials in mind. So this part of the movement with the balance might be visible. So Seiko has taken a good amount of time finishing the bridge there above the balance, whereas they really haven't taken as much time here on the faceplate. And really, you can just look at that and understand that the most expensive brands that are actually putting work into it, they're doing this all over and covering it up, and essentially only a watchmaker is ever going to see it. But that's a good example of what interior movement finishing means. Sector dial watches don't usually have lume, but the very simple shape of the hands here doesn't really help with readability. I would have liked to see Dauphine or maybe syringe hands. Syringe hands would be particularly appropriate because of this pulsometer scale here, and that allows you to take a pulse. It's a feature on retro doctor's watches, especially chronographs. For that reason, I think it's probably a holdover from Pierre Paulin's ST19 mechanical chronographs, because no real physician would wait up to a minute to take a pulse. Initially, I ordered this watch on a fitted silicone strap that I thought really fit with the medical theme. Now, unfortunately, the Mercure shop on AliExpress, they got in touch with me to say that they were not available. And would I accept a replacement strap? Now, 9 out of 10 times, this is the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals. I've been burnt by this before. But I wanted to review the watch anyway, so I said, yeah, whatever, send it to me, go on. And when the watch shows up, it comes on this, very nice textured leather strap. Have quick release pins on the back, and it's signed Mercure. And then I look at the packaging. And look at the packaging over here. Again, Mercure, right? And I find this. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, great. Another phony croc strap to throw in the drawer. I'm like, wait, hold on. Yeah, I think that might be real reptile skin. And that's really a first for an AliExpress watch, especially at this price point. And for a quick comparison, we can take out, this is actually the strap that the escapement time came on. And it is a very nice leather strap. I'm just not a big fan of printed alligator or printed croc. And so if you look at it, the real tell is the inconsistencies. How messed up is it? You want to see more of a natural grain as opposed to something that is trying to copy the most expensive part of the animal with a square grain. And I have to say, I'm convinced. It doesn't really make sense to stamp leather with false claims, because you're just increasing the chance that it's going to get caught at customs. And I have to say, it's really imperative that Mercure has shipped that separately from the watch itself, because I've seen dealers that have driven in a panic cross country to convince a customs official to cut with scissors the strap off of a Patek Philippe and save the watch, as opposed to destroying or seizing the whole thing. So if you're, if you're against reptile leather, or if you're worried about your own country's customs, I'm not a lawyer, then feel free to get in touch with the store, and I'm sure they will be happy to accommodate you. But I just kind of like the natural shape to it. So we have similar styles with different design cues. The left is more early mid-century, the right is more late mid-century. They have similar specs as mentioned. They both have 50 millimeters water resistance. The Pierre Paulin is automatic and has a bit more going on with the case, whereas the escapement time is thinner and cheaper because of the quartz movement, and also has those beautiful hands. If I had a comment, I'd like to see this kind of interesting case finishing done on the escapement time, and something like these Dauphine hands done on the Pierre Paulin. The blued seconds hands are extremely well done on both sides. I can't really say for certain if they're thermally blued, but it's certainly a very high quality chemical process at least. And for reference, here's a cheap painted pair of blue hands. And you can tell that the luster of the light reflecting is very different. And then when you look on the back, you can see, yeah, it's just painted. And, I think I'm going to leave it there, because we are comparing blued seconds hands on watches that cost less than a Seiko 5 does nowadays. And I think it just goes to show that there's a lot to look forward to. Well, it's been quite a journey with this one, but I still think it's a hidden gem. What do you think? Leave a comment and subscribe. It really helps this early on. Next time, we're going to be taking a quick break from the reviews, because we're going to look at my top affordable picks on AliExpress for this sale.